I'm really excited to present this panel on public health, R in public health. And our first presenter is Ariane Erickson, presenting top features every public health dashboard needs. Ariane.
Thank you. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about the top features every public health dashboard needs. Again, my name is Ariane Erickson, and I'm going to be drawing on my experience building dashboards at the Oregon Health Authority in the Injury and Violence Prevention Program. My goal today is to provide you with some features to help you improve your dashboards, whether or not you're building public-facing dashboards or your dashboards are internal. And I'm hoping to help you make your dashboards usable, accessible, and actionable. So I want to talk about the balancing act of building our shiny dashboards, or really any dashboard. Frequently when you're building dashboards, you have a couple features that you have to weigh. There are a lot of different trade-offs. So today we're going to talk about accessibility and user feedback and balancing that with some interactivity. And frequently you can't integrate everything that you want because you're designing all of this under this kind of ever-present storm cloud of performance. So the more that you integrate, the more clunky your app becomes, the more visual clutter that you're adding. And especially for public-facing dashboards, it's really important to design with a purpose. So I'm going to jump in today by showing a few of the dashboards that I've built at the Oregon Health Authority. I do want to just note at the top here that these dashboards do contain fatality information in Oregon. So just want to give you a heads up. But this is version 1 of a dashboard that I built using R Shiny. And you can see this is very basic. This is R Shiny out of the box. You've got the sidebar layout here. And if we scroll over to the data pages, you can copy and paste these figures into our beautiful mint green annual reporting. Which is why they are that way. But you also have some really basic just interactivity here. And what you might be noticing is that this is a pretty basic shiny dashboard, but it's very functional. This is getting our data out to the public. And after we published this, we got a lot of really good feedback. But we also got some feedback that people wanted more data. They wanted more. And this was especially true for our most visited dashboard, which is our overdose prevention dashboard. So last fall, we did a revamp project and redesigned our most popular dashboard. A few of the key changes that we made was changing that sidebar layout to more of a web page-like layout where you're able to kind of navigate with these top tabs at the top of the dashboard. We unfortunately got rid of that mint green, but we also increased the contrast of this dashboard. So it's a lot higher contrast, a lot easier on your eyes. We added some section headers so users could easily jump to the different sections that they were most interested in. And then for every figure, we added an accompanying data table that is downloadable. So if the users wanted the data that they had filtered for, they could take it with them. So you can see that none of these changes are huge or groundbreaking, but they really changed the usability of this dashboard and made it a lot cleaner. So now that we've seen some of these features in practice, let's talk about them individually. And we're going to start with accessibility. And so accessibility just means you want as broad of audience as you can to be able to use your dashboard. That might mean people coming to your dashboard with different tech skills, different abilities, different backgrounds, and if they can't read it or they can't navigate it, they're not going to be able to use your dashboard, no matter how cool your figure is, no matter how interactive your charts are, or how compelling your data story is. So when you're thinking about accessibility in your dashboard, there's really kind of 3 key components here. In terms of text, we're only going to think about the visuals around text. So you want to pick a highly readable font. In general, that's thought to be a sans serif font. Those are always pretty good choices. You want to pick a large enough font size that it's highly readable. This is not true. You should pick something around 14 pixels. So sorry about the apologies for that there. But again, you want to pick something that when somebody comes to your dashboard with an iPhone or a computer, they're able to still read the text. In terms of color, picking something really high contrast between your background and your text is very important. You can see how much easier it is to read this high contrast option, even though it is very small on this screen. And so in general, you're aiming for something greater than 4.5. And then navigation is something that we often neglect thinking about, but is really, really important. You want to make sure there's a hierarchy and prominent landmarks on your dashboard so people know how to move about the dashboard, whatever page they are on. So an example of this could be using icons like a home icon or the questions icon in order to help people navigate your dashboard. If this is a lot and you haven't encountered this before, I would encourage you to check out Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are really great standards to kind of get you started in this building accessible dashboards world. And I actually think the easiest way to demonstrate accessibility is to go through an example. So this is version 1 of the dashboard, and we're just going to rate it pass, fail in terms of text, color, and navigation. So hopefully in this room, everybody's able to read this font, the sans serif font. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a pass. That's a good font choice. In terms of color, that blue-gray background and my blue text is not great together. I think it's especially difficult to read in this header and these hyperlinks. They're really blending into the background here. So I'm going to go ahead and fail this in terms of color. And then in terms of navigation, I know that this dashboard is multiple pages, but I bet you don't know that, and you don't know how to get to those pages. So this is a fail for navigation. And you might be thinking, what a terrible dashboard. It only passed 1 out of 3 of your criteria. And I want to assure you that even making one good accessibility choice really changes the usability of your dashboard. So we're going to take our text win here, and we're going to try to fix the color. When I first started building dashboards, I used Shiny Theme. I have now converted to using the BS Lib package and BS Theme. You get the same themes, but more customization. So the numbers up here are the contrast values. Remember, I'm trying to get these to be high contrast values, so greater than 4.5. So to do that, I'm going to change the background of my theme to a true white. The theme that I'm using has kind of like a light blue primary color. So I'm going to change that to a darker blue, navy. And then if I had picked a cursive font, I could change that here. So I could correct my ways. If I go ahead and apply all of these changes, you can see that this is a much more high contrast design. This is a much brighter background and a lot easier to read. And then as you're building dashboards, if you want to evaluate these type of things on the fly, you can use a package called the Shiny Ally package. It is really, really easy to integrate, and it gives you this little toolbar to let you look at a bunch of different accessibility features as you're developing. This is incredible. I really love this tool. So I'm going to pass this for color now. This is much better. My contrast values are where I want them. And I'm going to go ahead and start to address navigation. So navigation is minimized behind these 3 lines here. But if instead I go ahead and anchor this to the side of the dashboard, so whatever page you're on, navigation is right there on the left-hand side. This really increases the navigation and usability of this dashboard. If I want to go one step further, I can go ahead and set my language, the language on my dashboard. So that's right down here with this tag, as well as a title. And this really helps screen readers navigate your dashboard, gives them some prominent landmarks, as well as tab users. And then because I'm going for an A+ rating today, I'm also going to add a skip link at the top of this dashboard. And this is helpful for everyone. If you want to just skip straight to the data, this link is going to do that for you. And so this is a really good addition to dashboards. So now I passed, and this dashboard is looking good in terms of accessibility. So we're going to move on to our next balancing act feature, which is interactivity. And this is the reason why we all love to code in Shiny. We love to make awesome dynamic plots. And one other piece of interactivity is downloadable. So making sure that the data that you have presented to people, they can make it actionable. So we're going to go through another example here with interactivity. This is just a really basic ggplot. And in general, if I had this on my dashboard and a user came to my dashboard, they might glance at this, give me a couple seconds, and then move on. And so this isn't really providing that purpose and that actionable value for them. So if instead of using ggplot, I use ggplotly, which will convert my static plot into something more interactive, I'm now providing a lot more value for my users. So the ggplotly is going to give me that hover box. So my users will be able to explore the exact values behind each of the data behind my plot. And ggplotly also allows the users to download that figure. So you're not going to have to screenshot this. I'm just going to allow you to download it. If on top of that, I add in some filters and some custom views, so I'm updating my headings and my titles and my hover boxes as you're picking different values and different filters. Now, this is interactivity with a purpose. I'm not just giving you visual clutter, but as you're exploring the data, the plot is reminding you the filters that you've chosen. If I take this one step further, I can also add a data table that has that same data. This is really screen reader friendly. This allows people to have two ways basically to get to your data. And if I also give you a downloadable button, now you can take that data, you can join it with your data and create something else. So this is really actionable for my users. Okay, now we're going to the final piece of this balancing act. So let's talk about feedback. There's kind of two feedback loops that are really important when you're designing dashboards. The first one is an internal feedback loop, and this is just to really make sure that you're putting out a high quality product, making sure your data is accurate, making sure the priorities of this dashboard are aligning with your organization's priorities. And this is going to be really dependent on where you work. Really important to set up, but I'm not going to touch on that too much because I'm going to spend a lot of time on external feedback here. I think sometimes this is overlooked. So the pieces of external feedback that we're going to talk about are user testing and subscriber and feedback forms. And I'm going to talk about user testing in terms of an example here. So when we did our dashboard redesign, I was super excited to have another shot at Shiny and another shot at these dashboards. And so I designed this homepage. And I thought I was being really fancy, putting the nav bar up here. And I thought this made like a really sleek, minimal look to our dashboard. So we started user testing this with people who had never seen this dashboard before. And we started getting a lot of the same feedback, which was, how do I get to the data pages? What's going on? So what we realized is by tucking this up here into that navigation bar, the links to the different pages were actually invisible to users. They were unable to see these because it was just buried right into our logo. So building on that feedback, we brought the links out of that top navigation panel and brought them into the main body of the dashboard, and we don't get that feedback at all anymore. And so this is why usability testing and user testing is really important for people who've never seen your dashboard before. You can design something completely unusable really easily. Okay, so the last phases of external feedback I want to talk about are more ongoing. So when you user test, usually you're putting out a big product, you're releasing your dashboard for the first time. It's kind of one-time feedback, but a subscriber list and feedback form are more like ongoing feedback. You want to be able to evaluate how you're doing kind of as the dashboard is out there. So we are doing this in kind of two ways in my team. One is a subscriber list where we'll email you a new release of the dashboard. And this just opens an open line of communication with our users. They're able to ask questions about the release if they want. It kind of puts a face behind the dashboard. And our questions and feedback form, again, this is always, there's a link to this on all of our dashboards. This is always ever present, and users are just able to provide us feedback, ask a question, request more data, and both of these open a line of communication with the users. The important piece to getting user feedback is acting on user feedback. If people are giving you feedback and you're doing nothing about it, they're going to stop giving you feedback. So us kind of putting our money where our mouth is, we were getting a lot of feedback through our form that the data on our dashboard was not current enough. it was not current enough to be actionable to anybody. So when we did the revamp project, we really wanted to make sure to address this. So we did two different things. We added a new data source that we could release monthly. So we could put out monthly data releases. And then for every annual view that we had on the dashboard, we tried to also do a quarterly view. So every time that quarter closed and we had all that data, we were able to release it. We didn't have to wait that full year for the release of that data. And both of these were really well received. Okay, the final piece of feedback that we use is Google Analytics. So we integrated web analytics into all of our dashboards, and it really helps us prioritize our development. So really focusing in on the dashboards that are the most visited, on the pages that are most popular, on the tables that are most downloaded. The other thing that we learned is we actually have a pretty consistent contingent of people coming to our dashboard using their mobile phone, which we maybe should have guessed. But right now that is helping us kind of revamp our dashboards again and making them more mobile friendly. So this isn't something we necessarily prioritized the first time around. Okay, so based on our three features, accessibility, interactivity, and user feedback, let's do a couple key takeaways. So in terms of accessibility, you want to really choose readable fonts in high contrast colors, and pick a really clear navigation process to help people move through your dashboard. In terms of interactive, you want to make it interactive with a purpose. You want to allow users to explore and export, but don't get too nuts with it. And then you want to gather and act on feedback. This should be internal and external feedback loops, so your dashboard is evolving with users as they're giving you feedback. Good dashboards don't just show data, they also guide decisions. And that is all I have today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ariane. And next we have Andie, Hendrick, and Arilene, Novak presenting Workshop to Workflow, Automizing Weekly Respiratory Reports with Quarto.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. My name is Andie Hendrick, as I just told you recently, and this is Arilene Novak, my colleague over at the Oregon Health Authority. And we are respiratory epidemiologists. And so this time last year, we took the Quarto workshop with JD in Charlotte, and we were introduced to Quarto for the very first time. And then we immediately went to work on Monday. And we were like, let's start using it. So we're going to give you a little bit of a background about what we do and then how we use Quarto. So our respiratory work, it starts in October of every year. And so from October through April, we are focused on collecting hospitalization data. And so we collect that data, we conduct chart reviews, we submit data to CDC on a weekly basis, and then we also publish our respiratory data publicly for everyone to see on a weekly basis. At the end of each respiratory season, we spend about 3 months cleaning all of the data we collected. We prepare it all and send it over to CDC for analysis, and we also conduct several special projects for CDC. And then we get to July, which is the most fun time of the year. It's when we get to do our fun data modernization projects. And so we get to kind of like take a look at the last year and say, what do we want to modernize and improve? So that way next year our life is even better. And last year we decided that we wanted to automate our weekly reports. And so I'm sure you've all have heard this story before, but our old process for generating our weekly reports was pretty cumbersome. It involved downloading data from REDCap, cleaning that data in SAS, taking that output, copying and pasting it into Excel where it would give us a graph, copying and pasting that into Microsoft Publisher. And then we would go into Publisher and we would have to like manually update all of these things in red boxes, including the dates, including the numbers. And there were mistakes every week. And so we would always need a second reviewer because you're doing this every week, you're tired, you're working a lot, and someone would have to be like, Andie, why why did you say there were 110% of influenza tests? That's just not how it works. And so just a lot of data entry error. And so we decided we wanted to take our Quarto skills and automate this process to minimize the human data entry error.
I just wanted to say we inherited those reports. So
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know that.
we
I
didn't
know
do that.
Yeah, that wasn't me. That wasn't Arlene.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
All right. So now we're going to be talking about our new process for our respiratory reports. Our new streamlined process includes exporting data from REDCap and then rendering the report into Quarto. So what used to be a time-consuming task now takes us about 5 minutes to complete from beginning to end. So on the left picture over there, those shows the 15 individual scripts that are used for our report. So these scripts include data cleaning steps. It also includes how we create our tables and our figures. And the reason why we have a script for each one is it allows Quarto to pinpoint the errors more easily, which also helps us for any troubleshooting, especially during our initial rollout. The picture on the right shows our Quarto markdown file that brings everything together and reads in those 15 individual scripts. It also applies our report template that includes our agency's logo, which you've seen quite a bit today. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and show you the first 2 pages of our flu bites report, which is our influenza report. So on the picture on the left over here, it includes our new agency's logo. We also have a table that shows percent positivity for influenza by state and region using a flex table. And then finally on the left side, a heat map that shows percent positivity by region using GMSF for spatial visualization. On the right, we have automated text summary, and these numbers are automatically updated each week using object values. So no manual edits are needed, which saves us time and improves accuracy. And then finally, on the bottom right is a graph that shows flu hospitalization rates by week and age group using ggplot. So this graph helps us visualize hospitalization trends over time in a clear and accessible way.
All right, we're also going to talk a little bit about accessibility. So the old report had like really small font. It didn't have great contrast. And so we saw this as an opportunity to just make some improvements. So I just wanted to share some of those with you all. So the one on the top left there is just a graphic from Harvard's Digital Accessibility Guide. And they just have incredible resources for how to use shapes, colors, and sizes. So that way folks don't have to rely on just color to understand our graphs. I also recently learned about the Hemingway app, which is a readability analysis tool. So it'll kind of help you identify any grammar issues, but it'll also let you know if your sentences are maybe too complex for the average reader, which when we're talking about hospitalization and rates and a lot of things, it can get really easy to get wordy. So I think this is also a good tool. And then for the revamp of our weekly report, I really leaned on the Leonardo color analysis tool. So you can put in your colors. And so we have specific agency colors that we have to use, but it will give you an analysis. You can put 2 colors next to each other and it will tell you how accessible are these colors next to each other. So while I have a specific color palette, I can really try to avoid putting specific colors next to each other in my graphs. And so these are just 3 tools that were useful to me. Maybe they'll be useful to you. So yeah, would recommend them.
So getting to this point did come with some growing pains. So here's how we approach those challenges and what we learned. So the first one, which seems to be like a common theme today, is tapping into your community. So we tapped into talking to our coworkers and also to the Oregon Health Authority, our user group. This helped us find creative solutions and seek feedback on our tables and figures. They also helped us. We had some issues using our template that contained our agency's logo. So they helped us with that. And they ensured that our format would stay consistent week to week. We also incorporated feedback from local public health departments, particularly about how we define regions in the state. So as a result, we added that heat map to clearly show which counties belong to what region. And then throughout this whole process, Andie and I worked together and reviewed each other's code for one, to check for any discrepancies, and also to make sure that pretty much our reports were identical for flu and RSV. During this process, we also built in logic checks. So we added would catch unusual and missing data. So for instance, if 0 hospitalizations were reported for that week, then the data frame knows to keep the column structure and shows true zeros. So the tables and figures didn't feel like they were being incomplete. And then lastly, was expecting first week wiggles. We gave ourselves grace and time to handle these unexpected issues. And most importantly, we made sure to block out time so we had time to actually tackle those on. And then once we ironed out the kinks, we've been able to step back and appreciate how much return we have received on our new process. So the biggest return on investment is, of course, the time. What used to take us about an hour to complete, now it takes us 5 minutes. And by 5 minutes, it's just exporting the data out. And then we click the render button. Usually it's time for coffee, get my coffee, come back, and it's done. Also, there's less manual steps and fewer programs. So as a result, we have fewer errors. We also have a better data structure. So now we're able to backlog hospitalizations, also any lab submissions. In our old report, that wasn't feasible, but now our figures and tables can go ahead and show that backlog. Since we have a framework in place, it can be easily used for other projects and possibly for other EPIs on our team. And then lastly, since this process is more streamlined, it does make it easier for us when cross coverage is needed and other members are absent.
All right, so for future plans, we have really appreciated switching things over to Quarto, and we're just excited to keep this momentum going. We want to take everything that has a clunky, cumbersome process and switch it over to R, and really just automate our jobs so that we can continue to just keep doing more analysis and doing more complex and robust things within our positions. So some of these ideas are building an API connection from REDCap to R to just streamline that data process and make it even faster. We also are hoping to apply this Quarto automated reporting to our other reports that we do. So we do a yearly hospitalization report that we're currently working on switching over to Quarto, so that way every year we can just update the new data source, spit out the report, and it can just be this very easy, streamlined process. I would love to do some fax templates in Quarto. We do a lot of vaccine outreach where we have to reach out to primary care providers, and so I would love to figure out a way to put that patient data in and then push that over to providers instead of having to really manually do any of that, because that takes up quite a bit of our time. And we'd also like to dabble in some Quarto dashboards. That's something we haven't done before, but it's something we're really interested in. A lot of our CDC surveillance work requires kind of weekly check-ins to make sure that we're collecting all the data we need to. And I think a dashboard to keep us in check would be really great. And in general, we're just pretty excited to just dive into supporting timely and data-driven public health interventions. So acknowledgements, the Oregon Health R user group has been an invaluable space to ask questions and to learn. Charlotte and JD did an incredible job at the workshop last year that really was, gave us all the tools to do this process. Andie Nunes Brewster has also been an incredible advocate for encouraging us to try hard things. And then Colin Donald over at DEQ helped me so much with my R code. And then these are our pets too, who provide emotional support to us. So thanks all, appreciate the time.
All right, so next we have Alec Kretchun, who's going to be presenting on evaluating access to care, healthcare. Alec?
Thank you, everybody. We're almost there. Thanks for hanging in there with me. So I'm Alec Kretchun with Kaiser Permanente here in Portland. And today we're going to talk about evaluating access to healthcare with some modern open source tools. So we'll start with some definitions just to kind of set the stage for everybody. The first of which is healthcare networks. Evan had a great talk on transit networks. and this is the exact same concept, except he was outlining shopping and employment and all these different types of destinations. We're really focused on healthcare providers, so doctors and hospitals, basically. You can plot out a physical footprint of that network based on travel times and distances, or wait times, other types of thresholds. And Kaiser is in a kind of a unique position to manage these networks because we're kind of coupled care and coverage, which is to say that we have an insurance arm, but we also employ the doctors and we own the hospitals. So we have a little bit more control over certain aspects of this. And so why do we want to measure it in the first place? Like, what's the whole goal of understanding what this network looks like? And that's really to evaluate the barriers to healthcare access. And in this case, those barriers are physical. There's a lot of barriers to healthcare access in this country. And so being able to measure them and quantify those barriers is the first step in trying to mitigate or solve for those where possible. So this brings a concept into focus now called network adequacy. And again, I wish I would have gone right after Evan. I wouldn't have to talk about a lot of these things. He could have just done it for me. But network adequacy is basically a health plan's ability to provide access to providers or hospitals to meet the community's healthcare needs. Do we have the right doctors, the right hospitals in the right places to serve the needs of the community that we're trying to serve? And so to evaluate that adequacy, we need to understand the network as it exists and where the patients or the members are. In addition to that, there's also state and federal regulations that define the standards for this stuff. Things like physician to enrollee ratio, time and distance standards, wait times. There's a litany of regulations that apply at different municipalities or different states, counties, et cetera. And so you can see at the bottom in this table some examples of those thresholds or those standards. And so just taking a look at that first row of primary care specialty in a large metro county like Multnomah County, for instance, there is a maximum time to resistance standard of 10 minutes or 5 miles. Basically, this says, in order for a healthcare network to be adequate, it has to provide access to a primary care physician within 10 minutes or 5 miles. That is the standard by which your network either is or is not adequate. And in addition to that, as a healthcare organization, we're trying to maximize access as much as possible. And so being able to understand where those gaps exist in our network is super important. So in thinking about building out tools for this purpose, like the solution that we're building, what do we want it to do? What aspects of a tool need to exist, both kind of from a technical standpoint as well as a workflow standpoint? And so first for us, this is a short list. The list was much, much longer, but these are some of the greatest hits. So separation of concerns from a technical standpoint. So separating out analysis, storage, and deployment. So this is really the idea of maximizing flexibility. So you can have multiple developers working on a single or multiple parts of this at any given time. You can update one portion of this without affecting the others. Flexibility really is the name of the game. We also need human scale geospatial analysis. The standards that we just saw identified time and distance thresholds of a person getting in their car or getting on the bus or walking or taking the bike or whatever way in which they're trying to access their physicians. And so our analysis needs to match that kind of human scale that those thresholds are defined at. And in addition, it also needs to have sort of an exploratory aspect, but also a decision support aspect. So these tools should be able to basically raise questions as well as answer them. And finally, reproducible and accessible. A lot of the folks who were talking prior to me said this much more eloquently than I will, but having reproducible results such that if a regulator comes to us months later and says, hey, we need these results again, we're able to produce those results identically to how we did before, as well as reproducible in the sense that if multiple people within the organization are trying to ask the same question, they come to the same answers. And accessibility, again, the folks prior to me said it very well, but being able to get these tools in the hands of the people that are interested in using them as easily as possible. And so here is kind of overview of an example workflow, and we won't go too in-depth on this particular slide because we'll step through kind of piece by piece. But on the left, we have our input data. We have our member data, which is patients, basically. Provider data, it's physicians and hospitals. Finally, the regulations or goals that apply. So by combining the locations of both our members and providers along with these defined thresholds, depending on what we're looking at, we're able to quantify where a network is or is not adequate for those purposes. And that's the spatial data analysis box there. Moving to the blue storage portion of the workflow, we'll get into the specifics on kind of how we configure Postgres servers. But the blue is sort of the middle point of persisting the data and then serving that data via API endpoints to our product focus, which in this case is Shiny Apps and Markdown and Quarto docs. So first step, data ingestion and analysis. So we get data from all over the place. I'm sure this is not foreign to anyone in this room, but there's internal, beautifully curated data marts and API endpoints. Get external flat files from people. Some guy was sending us screenshots. Like, it's all sorts of fun stuff. So a way to ingest this data in a language agnostic fashion is sort of what we were shooting for, to then do a number of different types of spatial analysis. These are a couple examples of the ones that we use most often. So there's sort of a service area approach, which is much more of a provider focus. So on the left figure, you have a single dot, which is single healthcare provider, and then the polygon that's created by saying, where is 10 minutes or 5 miles around this individual? What is their kind of catchment area for the environmental science folks in the room that can be plotted out in space for this single person. So the other kind of more rigorous version of this is an origin destination analysis. And this is something that I think everyone is familiar with from Google Maps or Apple Maps. Basically, you put in an origin, you put in a destination, and then it spits out turn-by-turn directions, and helpfully, in a little pop-up, also the minutes and miles, which is kind of the units that we're looking for our thresholds as well. In our case, for these origin destination analyses, we're talking about potentially millions of origins. We're talking about potentially thousands or tens of thousands of destinations being providers. So kind of the complexity of that, when you start to build out the permutations of all those, gets pretty intense pretty quickly. And as far as kind of the technical details, sort of some of the under the hood stuff, for certain analysis, we do use tools that are available via ArcGIS Pro. So we've built out some APIs that are kind of optimized for Python for a number of reasons. If you're curious, I can talk about that. But we've also built out R package wrappers for those as well. Shout out Reticulate, which I saw on a different slide. And then StreamApp Premium gives us kind of access to this turn-by-turn analysis that really is crucial in understanding a real-world accurate picture of accessibility. Okay, great. We've analyzed our data, we read it in, we analyzed it. Now we got to put it somewhere. We need to persist this data somewhere. And so this is probably the most important step of the whole thing for us. Given that we are a healthcare organization, security is our number one concern with this. And so, open source tools are great. Obviously, we're all enthusiasts, but they can create kind of unknown external connections or leave open doors if you're not aware fully of what's happening with them, right? And so part of the way that we've chosen to mitigate this, or part of the reason that we're able to mitigate this, given our lack of access to certain cloud tools because of the secure nature of our data, is to maintain on-prem resources and then sort of have them powered by Postgres, which is sort of the database side of this. Postgres is great. I don't know if anybody uses it with any frequency, but the extensibility is great. We have PostGIS enabled on ours. It allows for a lot of different types of data storage. It can allow a lot of different developers to interact with it and kind of read-write capacities. So we found it's just a really great tool. There's a lot of sort of server-side functions for particularly geospatial stuff, because geospatial data operations are extremely expensive, right? Compute expensive. So we can decide where to put that compute kind of in part because we have access to this Postgres kind of family of operations. And so great, we have our data. It's living happily on our Postgres servers. It's persisted, it's beautifully maintained. And now we need to get it to where it needs to go, right? We need to put it to our product side. So we have chosen to do that by implementing a number, depending on the project, typically a number of Plumber API endpoints. If anyone is familiar with the Plumber package in R, it's really, really great. It allows you to write REST API endpoints natively in R. And so then you can stand up any kind of endpoint you want to serve any kind of data you want. You can then kind of programmatically put together GET requests. You can get back sort of JSON data and use it all sorts of different ways. It's really, really allowed for us to be very, very targeted in how we want to serve data to our applications. And so for us, we use it in a lot of different ways. Like here's 3 examples of kind of different data applications we have for these endpoints. So we can serve administrative data or utility data. This is the states that this analysis is concerned with. There's, just simple lists of information that are relevant to our projects. Also administrative layers, sort of administrative geospatial layers that either look good on a map and we need them to make sort of the cartography side of this work, or that are used for geospatial operations, like spatial filters or joins or some of the other things that were being discussed earlier today. And so having those kind of ready and available, served from a centralized resource, but project specific is really, really helpful and kind of narrows the scope to a sort of a workable amount of information for a given project. And then finally, our analysis results, kind of the real work of it all, is sort of being able to serve those network adequacy analysis results in a fashion that's consistent with every other type of data that's being served to the project. It is really, really crucial for us to keep things lightweight, but also for this separation of concerns. We're not doing any business logic within the apps. We're not doing any kind of data transformation within our kind of, deployment side of things, the application side of things. So this really allows us to keep those houses nice and tidy. And so great, we have these endpoints, we've set them up, they're serving this beautiful data to us. Where do they go? How do people actually interact with this stuff to understand the results of the analysis, hopefully make some good decision based on it? And the answer for us a lot of times are Shiny apps. I don't have to extol the virtues of Shiny apps to this room probably, but for us, they've been great. There's a lot of design freedom. You can interact with a lot of the web design if you want to, but a lot of it is abstracted away. So you can stand things up real quick if you want to, or you can spend a lot of time customizing and making these, beautiful sort of project or product specific designs. And also, I think the easily shared component of this is really important. I mentioned up top, part of the goals for this, or part of the tools for this, goals for this tool rather, is accessibility, is being able to share a link that is stable to an app that people are able to just click and go. I think it was shared earlier in one of the RCO talks, just talking about it just has to work, and that's sort of our philosophy with this. And so one more example of this is in the goals section. I mentioned kind of that exploration plus decision support. I think Ariane said about interactivity with a purpose. I think that was the phrase. I really, really like that. So this is an example of one of the apps that we've stood up where on the left you have an interactive web map that allows you to make selections for specialty or zip code or geography type, whatever you want, and explore our healthcare network. And hopefully this raises some questions about where our gaps exist or do not exist, that then the decision support side of the house, which is contained in the same app, will make recommendations on providers that could potentially fill those gaps and the kind of projected coverage increases associated with those providers. So different parts of the organization can look at a centralized resource, come at it with different subject matter expertise, and hopefully have a conversation that results in more people getting access to care more quickly because they're looking at the same information. And then finally, real quick, another example of kind of the product side of the house is Markdown and Quarto docs. These are great. They kind of share the API endpoints that the Shiny apps do, which allows, again, some of that flexibility. But we're, with these tools, able to produce both summarized data analysis, like you see on the left, some more kind of executive summary style, but also we're able to put together more exhaustive documentation, nobody wants to read 400 pages of compliance percentages for dentists in Georgia, but it does make a really good appendix for a submission for any kind of regulatory submission. So with that, I will say thank you, and thank you to the organizers, and thanks for everybody for hanging in there. Appreciate it.
Want to? Okay.
All right. Thank you to all of our speakers, and we can open it up for some questions.
This one's for Andie or Ariane. You can answer. I noticed that you talked a lot about accessibility and the importance of that in your tools. I'm wondering, particularly for folks that use a screen reader, why the navigation was so important and why skip content. Like, can you say a little more about those things? Thanks.
Yeah, how dare you? Andy knows about this because he's been working on accessibility in my app. Yeah, I think honestly it was a surprise to us how inaccessible Shiny was, just kind of out of the box to a screen reader. OHA is kind of trying to stand up a accessibility team and work through some of these challenges. The skip link, honestly, I think is helpful for screen readers, people who are tabbing through your app, so they don't have to go through all of that main content before they can get to the data. And like truly, like anyone, like how many times do you want to just skip through all the nonsense and get to the recipe? Like I think skip links are incredible. So hopefully that answers your question. Thanks, Andy.
I was just curious, the team that was talking about integrating Google Analytics in order to get input on platforms and things, I know my team has looked at telemetry as another resource for that. Was that an alternative you considered, and was there a reason you went with Google Analytics? Or just
only like because I was aware of it previously, and it's really easy, right? I mean, they kind of hold your hand through the process. You integrate an HTML script, and then like Google Analytics hosts all of it. It gives you custom views. It's purely because it was simple and I knew about it. So I'll look into that resource for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think like all of our things are only internal facing, so that may also be a reason that for not going with Google Analytics in our situation. But I was just curious.
Yeah, I think like Google Analytics is not great if you want, well, I wouldn't say it's not great. It takes a little bit more to get like really detailed views about like specific pages or what is somebody exactly clicking. And that's something we're starting to dig into a little bit more. Like if we're hosting all these data tables, it's important to know if people are downloading them, because if they're not, maybe we don't need to do that. I'd totally be open to a different tool.
We have a couple questions from people online, so I'll go and read these. Question for Andie and Arilene, or anyone else who knows. Regarding accessibility, did you get Quarto to output an accessible tagged PDF? Non-tagged PDF isn't accessible to screen reader users. This is from Nathan. He's saying, I fought with PDF tagging a little bit, and as a result, I've switched to outputting standalone HTML docs instead for a lot of things. So I'm curious if that's something you've dealt with as well.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we still are exporting it as a Word document because we have other contributors adding to it. We definitely have some work to do for making it more screen reader friendly. I am using Flex Table in there, and unfortunately I have to like export that as an image and then bring it back in for formatting. So long answer short, it still has a lot of improvements to be made, which hopefully we're going to be doing this summer. I think a lot of times we're doing a lot of different jobs and we only have a very short period of time to make these improvements. So that is on our list and we're hoping to put time into it, but that's not something that we have addressed yet. Okay, so I'm gonna read it again. Are you launching scheduled automated tasks from a virtual machine or on a local machine? My department has been chaotic with figuring out where to schedule tasks that involve pulling private health data. Curious how you all go about it. Okay, we don't have anything scheduled. Right now, every Wednesday, we download data from REDCap. We also download data, our laboratory data. Eventually, like we said, we'd like to do it in an API, and then maybe we would schedule it, but we use REDCap exclusively, and we have an instance at the Oregon Health Authority that we use that houses all of our private health data. So I haven't gotten there yet, but in my mind, we will be scheduling it from, that instance of REDCap, and it will go onto our network that is accessible by all of our colleagues. Hopefully that answers your question. Anything to add, Arlene? Oh, yeah.
Just to add on what Andie said, so we are going to put it like from REDCap, which is like a survey/data management. If you're not familiar with REDCap, pretty much we're going to build an API. So instead of the step being, exporting our data to REDCap and then using R, now it's just going to be rendering a report. So now we're eliminating all the steps. So that's coming hopefully next month.
I guess it depends on sort of where things live, but there's a lot of kind of homebrew options for scheduling stuff. I mean, Windows Task Scheduler, you can run automated R scripts there. There's cron jobs on Linux machines. There's a couple awesome talks on GitHub Actions. So I think a lot of that stuff is accessible for simple jobs. You don't have to go and implement Airflow and have all these complicated DAGs and all that sort of stuff. I think if you're just trying to run a script to go fetch data, I think, depending on your environment and stuff, there's a lot of options.
Hi, I'll call on myself. For Ariane, so I love your focus on accessibility so much, and I've always found that finding the best way to make accessible visualizations, it's always been a trick. It's really tricky, and I'd never heard of that tool that you mentioned. That I'm really curious to look at it, the Shiny Accessibility app, which I wrote down somewhere. But do you know if that works only on pure Shiny, or can it be used on like a Shiny Quarto, like a dashboard combination? Is there a limitation?
That's a good
there?
question. We initially designed our dashboards in Flex Dashboard, and I feel like it worked there as well. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure.
I'll have to try it.
It's called Shiny Ally. It's A11Y. So check it out.
Thank you. Oh, right over here.
This is also a question for the OHA dashboard folks. I've worked on some projects where there are easy reading accessibility standards, and I'm just wondering if you've considered any ways of incorporating that into your workflow.
Oh my goodness. We spent a quarter on this. I think a couple people here have mentioned this before. There is a really tricky balance between it's supposed to be an 8th grade reading level if your dashboard is public facing, and talking about rates and counts and those type of things can be really difficult to get to an 8th grade reading level. We found users coming to us asking for the exact ICD-10 codes that we're using to roll up these type of injury types. So we actually ended up scrapping that project. I think honestly we weren't using a great readability tool to evaluate our readability. You could kind of game it by making short sentences that maybe didn't make it more readable. This is something that we are focusing on. I know you presented a reading accessibility tool that we want to get there, but currently our dashboard does not have an 8th grade reading level accessibility